Hey horror fans, welcome back to Room 237, coming at you with another Hammer film, which turns out I thought I had all the Frankenstein films, but I'm actually missing the fourth one, so I can't continue the actual series, but I can with this film, Horror of Frankenstein, which came out in 1970. This is the sixth Frankenstein film in the Hammer series, but it's completely unrelated to anything that they've done before. Because, for whatever reason, the same year, 1970, they also did Scars of Dracula. In fact, the two were on a double bill together. And they're both sort of loose remakes, reboots of the series. Only with this one, the next film actually went back to the Peter Cushing series and actually ended it. So this acts as a completely standalone Frankenstein film. It's considered a dark parody of the original story of Frankenstein. It was produced and directed by Jimmy Sangster, who I guess is really known for his dark sense of humor and coming into Hammer trying to make it goofy. And actually, what I'm going to do is, because I have two playlists on here, All Things Dracula and All Things Frankenstein. Originally, when I made those, it was because, like for example, just hold up Dracula. It was going to be all films based on this. So it would have been like Nosferatu, Bela Lugosi Dracula, Horror of Dracula, and then even the Leslie Nielsen comedy Dracula Dead and Loving It, because it's all based on the Bram Stoker story. And also Bram Stoker's Dracula, which I have, but I haven't reviewed it yet. But I ended up putting all the sequels that are pretty much unrelated to the original Mary Shelley Bram Stoker stories. So I'm going to make two new playlists. It's going to be called All Films Based on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, Bram Stoker's Dracula. So if you just want to see all the different versions and not have to worry about sequels, but just see how many different versions of that story there are, you can check out those playlists. Because also with the Frankenstein one, there's, Young Frankenstein. I even put Tim Burton's Frankenweenie on there. I love Frankenweenie. It's a great movie. I love Young Frankenstein. But anyways, so back to this movie. It stars Ralph Bates, who was previously in Taste the Blood of Dracula. I guess Hammer was sort of grooming him to become the next Christopher Lee or Peter Cushing. Didn't work out that way. I love Ralph Bates in this film. He did a great job. But there's also Veronica Carlson, who this was her third film. She was in Taste the Blood of Dracula, Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed, and then this. And Veronica Carlson really did not like this movie because she loved Hammer. She was a big fan of Hammer as, the films, but also just the production company and the people behind it. And when the film before this, Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed, she had a very strong role, a very challenging role. And in this, she's just kind of, as it's been put, like a damsel on the sidelines. And she did not like the humor, the fact that it was sort of not just poking fun at the story of Frankenstein, but just Hammer in general. And yeah, it's basically, it really is just the story of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, but obviously a lot of differences. And and sort of not at all to the extent of Young Frankenstein, but sort of what's called gallows humor. That's even one of the special features on here, gallows humor inside Horror Frankenstein. Of course, this is the Scream Factory release. I've been finding a lot of these Scream Factory releases, excuse me, for very cheap. Which that's Ralph Bates as Victor Frankenstein. Who, Ralph Bates, in this role in particular, he reminded me a lot of Lawrence Oliver, especially Lawrence Oliver as Richard III. Because Victor Frankenstein in this movie is... he's unlike any other one. Take the hard-driven sociopath that Peter Cushing played as Victor Frankenstein, but bring it to, like, the extreme satirical level of, like, look at Christian Bale as Patrick Bateman in American Psycho, and how that's a parody or a satire of The Guys on Wall Street, and how he is in that movie. Almost to that. Extremely self-absorbed. He's a womanizing misogynist. He's just... I mean, he will kill and set up anybody just to get his way. And the monster himself, who's played by David Prowse, who, of course, David Prowse would go on. His legacy will be known. I'm pretty sure he was Mr. Universe at one point. I could be wrong on that. I'm sure one of my new subscribers, this guy Lewis, will tell me, because he's been telling me random facts on all my videos. And then doesn't respond to any replies when I ask him about them. Sound like shit. David Prowse had been wanting to play a hammer monster for some time. And they just never gave him the chance. But now, he's the only person to play Frankenstein's monster more than once in the Hammer series. Because he was in the next film, Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell. But what I was going to say was, David Prowse will probably forever be known as the in-suit, on-screen actor for Darth Vader. But for me, David Prowse will always be known as Julian, the bodyguard on Clockwork Orange. So anyway, I mean, we see Victor Frankenstein. He's, like, the film opens up. We see, like, the old European suit, like the ruffles. There's, like, a picture of a naked woman. And he, like, a marker. He's, like, drawing, like, lines on certain parts of the anatomy as the credits come on. And then finally, slash across her throat. As a young man, his father wants him to, focus his attention on other things, so he sabotages one of his hunting rifles. So when he shoots it, it kills him. He becomes Baron Frankenstein, inherits the fortune. He goes to school in Vienna, but he gets expelled for getting the dean's daughter pregnant. Which, there is this funny line where when he gets expelled because he got the dean's daughter pregnant, he just very dryly says, well, I could give her a simple operation. Which we all know what operation that is. And then he decides he wants to create a man from all these different body parts. He has this one guy collect bodies for him. One of his friends who I thought it was Henry because I missed his name, but Henry is also the name of the lieutenant. Must have been. Okay, I guess his friend was Wilhelm Castor. I guess that was the name of his friend. But like he says, he's gonna report him to the authorities because he knows what he's doing, and he tricks him, and he just ends up electrocuting him. And Ralph Bates is just one of the best psychopaths I've seen in film. Just cold all the time. But when he's talking to people, he's got this charm that he can just turn on. And he does it wonderfully. He does a great job with it. He kills the grave robber that gets him bodies because he tricks him too, because the lab, there's like this tank with these huge jugs that like dump into this thing, and it's actually an acid vat. And his housemaid, Elise, is played by Kate O'Mara. She keeps letting on that she knows some things, and they like have sex together. She's his housemaid, but he has no feelings towards her at all. She keeps hinting that she knows what's going on, and he lets it slide for a little bit. And the guy whose brain he wants, he does get the brain, and he lets his beautiful young daughter, played by Veronica Carlson, move in for a little bit, eventually become the housemaid. She is Elizabeth. But instead of Elizabeth being his true love that he can't wait to marry, it's just a woman that wouldn't mind marrying him because she's homeless. The creditors took her father's house. She probably wouldn't mind marrying him, but he'd rather just have her as the housemaid. And we finally see the monster, and David Prowse as the monster. Very simple makeup. I mean, if he wasn't Mr. Universe, he was a huge bodybuilder. So, I mean, he has some scars with stitches, like up on his shoulders, but his whole body, there's not really anything. It's all on his head. Like, he's got this neck shackle. Sort of a flat top. Excuse me, flat top like on the forehead. Bunch of lines and scars. And the monster is just an unstoppable killing machine. He kills just because. Like, when he gets out and he even... There's I guess like a timberman or someone. He just grabs his axe and fucking kills him. But then Victor Frankenstein, he's able to teach him how to sit with food and sort of obey commands. And then he becomes his own personal killing machine. He even gets his cook, Stefan, is like, after the woodcutter was killed, he's like, I saw this big monster, and this guy with no clothes. And Victor's like, tell the police exactly that's what you saw. So he does, but then when he tells the lieutenant, who, instead of having a friend named Henry, Henry is he's a lieutenant. They're kind of rivals. Stefan explains what he saw, and then Victor just rolls over on him. He's just like, well, that does sound crazy, and I did see him with the axe, so you might want to take him away. There is no blind... There is no blind man or a girl by the pond or anything like that. There is like a young girl scene, but he doesn't kill her, he just scares her. But there's no blind man. And what's different about the end of this movie is spoilers, but even though I've already given away the whole movie, spoilers. But definitely check this out. This is a Hammer film that you can just check out at any time. It is standalone. It is one of the... It's not like a random sequel. It is a Frankenstein movie. It is based on, the original Mary Shelley story. So, spoilers. What's different about this one is the monster dies, and Victor gets away with everything, which is very different. I gotta give it credit for that, because by this point, everyone knows Victor's either harboring a killer or something of the sort. So he drugs the monster and he hides him. And, the little girl from the college that the monster scared, and her dad, the police, and Elizabeth, who saw the monster and was attacked but brought back to bed. They're all in Victor's lab, and the girl is just touching shit. And he's just like, well, go ahead and look wherever you need to, but you're not going to find anything. And the girl touches the lever where those acid jugs pour into the vat. So after everyone leaves, Victor goes up to it, and two shoes just float up to the top. And he just kind of looks off. Freeze frame. Hammer production. So he got away with it. And yeah, the humor is very dark. It's very tongue-in-cheek. It is... I would say it's a fair parody of the Mary Shelley story. It's not one of the hundreds of random films that just has the name Frankenstein attached to it. It is based on the source material. Ralph Bates, I thought he was great in this movie. This is definitely the most evil, sociopathic, psychopathic, just vile versions of Victor Frankenstein I've ever seen. He's not the obsessed and then regretful Colin Clive. He's even more sociopathic and evil than Peter Cushing. He's not the well-to-do Gene Wilder and hilarious, legendary Gene Wilder. But I would say, even as a standalone film, another adaptation of the classic Frankenstein story, it is still very entertaining, as different as it is. I'm not the biggest fan of the design of the monster, but it worked for the kind of film this was. It did kind of suck that, well, it didn't really suck, but because I'm super used to, and I still love the most, the Boris Karloff one, the Gentle Giant. So when you have a cold-blooded, just because killer of a monster, it worked for the film. And even David Prowse, he gets this look even as the monster is just like kind of cocky. But no, all the other performances were fine. you felt sympathy for the characters you're supposed to, like like Stefan, the wife of the guy that helped him get the bodies. Just because she's asking around, he acts like he's helping her out, and he was like, "Well, you might want to go tell the police that he's missing. Take the shortcut through the woods." So she does, and then he goes right down to the monster. He's like, "Hey, got a job for you." And when he kills her, he doesn't just grab her by the neck and pick her up. The sound effect is like a twig snapping to imply that he snapped the fuck out of her neck. But yeah, this was, again, very dark, very tongue-in-cheek. It's not a laugh-out-loud movie like Young Frankenstein or like Evil Dead 2 or anything like that. It is very twisted kind of humor, but I thought it was very entertaining. I really enjoyed it. If you're a fan of the story Frankenstein, like the actual story, not just movies that has the name attached to it, then I think you will find this as, like, it's not a worthy adaptation, like, say, a Mary Shelley's Frankenstein with Robert De Niro and Kenneth Branagh. But, worth checking out, just for how unique it is, the fact it's Hammer. You can definitely tell it's from the period because the blood is that vibrant, paint-looking blood that was in European films at the time. But yeah, horror Frankenstein, I actually really dug it. So yeah, I'm going to make those playlists. So when it says films based on, there'd be one for Frankenstein, one for Dracula. Those are the ones that will be based on the original story. No sequels, no nothing, except for Bride of Frankenstein. Completely standalone, I guess adaptations, even how different they might be. And then I will still leave the all things Frankenstein and Dracula for all the sequels and everything like that. But anyway, thank you for watching.